There is a kind of quiet that arrives in the half-second before a buried charge decides whether it will kill you, and Marlowe Quinn had spent 4 years learning to live inside it. Most people never hear that quiet in their whole lives. She heard it every time the mop bucket stopped sloshing, and the wax buffer wound down, and the marble corridors of the Hollis Reardon Federal Courthouse went still around her. To everyone who saw her there at 2 a.m, she was just the night custodian, a thin woman in a gray uniform shirt, 2 sizes too big, her hair scraped into a knot that had given up on being pretty sometime around the second tour. They had no idea that the same hands wringing out a mop had once disarmed a pressure plate IED with a multi-tool and a prayer, while a sniper worked the rooftop above her. She liked it that way. Invisible was a place she had fought hard to get to. The Reardon Courthouse in downtown Minneapolis was an ugly slab of limestone and bad 70s architecture, 11 floors of judges and clerks, and the particular smell of old paper, cold coffee, and the lemon disinfectant Marlowe pushed across its floors 5 nights a week. By day it roared. By night, it belonged to her and to the security desk and to the steady ice that had been ticking against the tall windows for 6 hours straight. A winter storm had rolled down out of Canada that evening and parked itself over the Twin Cities, dropping the kind of freezing rain that brought down power lines and made the local news anchors say the word historic over and over. Marlowe had heard the transformers on 4th Avenue blow around 11. Half the block had gone dark. The courthouse, running on its own emergency generators, glowed alone like a lit match in a black field. She was 29 years old, and the quietest employee in the building, and that was no accident. Quinn. The voice cracked across the second-floor rotunda like a thrown stone. Quinn, are you blind, or just lazy? Marlowe straightened from her bucket and turned without hurry. Deputy U.S. Marshal Bram Stockton was crossing the marble toward her with his thumbs hooked in his duty belt, a man who had decided sometime in middle age that authority was a personality. He ran courthouse security like a small kingdom, and he had disliked Marlowe from the first week, the way certain men dislike anyone who refuses to flinch. He gestured at a smear of melted ice near the metals detectors. There's a slip hazard right where the protectees walk in the morning. You've been over this floor twice and you missed it. You understand we've got a federal trial up there? He jabbed a finger at the ceiling. You understand the kind of people in this building right now? I don't have time to babysit the cleaning staff. I'll get it now, Marshal Stockton, Marlowe said. Her voice came out soft, flat, faintly apologetic. She kept her eyes down. Thank you for catching it, he snorted. Just do your job. Some of us carry real responsibility around here. He turned on his heel, the leather of his belt creaking, and stalked back toward the security station, where 2 younger deputies pretended not to have watched. She mopped the spot. She did not let her shoulders tighten. Stockton's contempt was a small, dry thing, and she had survived worse than small, dry things. She had once spent 19 hours flat on her belly in a helmand wadi, while men with rifles walked past, close enough that she could have counted the stitching on their sandals. And the only thing that had kept her alive was the gift of being utterly perfectly still. Bram Stockton's voice did not frighten her. It barely reached her. To Marlowe Quinn, the inside of a courthouse at night was the safest place she had ever been allowed to stand, and she would have polished its floors for free. Odessa Lyle came out of the elevator pushing the trash cart, took one look at Marlowe's face and the retreating shape of the marshal, and made a low sound in her throat. Odessa had run the building's maintenance crew for 22 years, a wide, slow-moving woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the unshakable calm of someone who had outlasted 4 chief judges and a flood. He talked to you like that again? She asked. It's fine. It is not fine, baby. You let that man wipe his boots on you every night. Odessa parked the cart and put her hands on her hips. You're allowed to have some teeth, you know that? A woman's allowed to bite back. Marlowe almost smiled. I don't mind. Odessa studied her with the patient eyes of a person who suspected she was being lied to and had decided to let it go for now. You're a strange one, Marlowe Quinn. Strange and too quiet for your own good. She wheeled the cart towards the stairwell. Storm's getting mean. You feel that draft? Something's wrong with the east doors again. Marlowe had already felt it. She felt it the way she felt everything. Automatically, a habit beaten into her bones in places with no names. The slight change in air pressure, the way the cold seam of outside air had found a path it should not have had. The east service entrance was supposed to be sealed and alarmed after 9. She filed the draft away in the back of her mind the way she had once filed away every wrong note in a marketplace, every too-still vehicle, every man whose coat hung heavier on one side than the other. She had filed away one such man 40 minutes ago. In fact, when a maintenance van none of them recognized had idled in the loading dock and a guy in a utility jacket had asked the night clerk where the generator room was. She'd watched him from the mezzanine. He'd carried himself wrong. His boots were tactical, not work boots. The jacket had hung heavy on the right hip. She had told herself she was being paranoid, that the war was 4 years gone, and she was a janitor now, and she had gone back to her bucket. But the part of her that had kept her alive had not gone back to anything. It had simply gone quiet and waited. Marlo Quinn had not always pushed a mop. 4 years earlier, she had been Sergeant First Class M. Quinn, call sign Saint, an explosive ordnance disposal technician cross-trained as a combat medic and attached to a joint special operations element that did not appear in any budget Congress was allowed to read. She had walked toward more bombs than she could count so that other people could walk away from them. She had pulled the wiring out of a suicide vest while its wearer was still breathing. She had carried a 19-year-old Ranger 400 meters with his leg gone below the knee and kept him talking the whole way about his mother's enchiladas so he wouldn't slip under. She had done a decade of that. And then, outside a town she was not allowed to say the name of, a secondary charge had gone off 3 feet to her left and taken 2 men she loved and a piece of her hearing and most of what was left of her ability to sleep through the night. They had given her a quiet medal in a quiet room and scrubbed her file clean, and the civilian world had been told, if it asked at all, that Marlo Quinn spent her 20s doing data entry for a defense contractor in Virginia. Nursing the floors of a federal building was supposed to be her retirement, a way to stay near purpose without standing in the blast radius of it. She had chosen invisibility on purpose, the way you choose a tourniquet, because the alternative was worse. At 2:14 a.m., the building's generators stuttered, surged, and dropped. For 3 full seconds, the courthouse went black and silent, the deepest dark Marlo had ever seen indoors. Then the battery-backed emergency lights snapped on in their dim red wash, painting the marble the color of an old wound. The HVAC died. The ice kept ticking against the windows, but underneath it now was a new sound, one that did not belong, a soft mechanical hum she recognized in her spine before her mind caught up. A signal jammer, industrial grade, eating every radio and cell band in the building. Whoever cut the generators had cut them on purpose. Generators do not fail at 2:14 in the morning by themselves, and they do not fail at the exact instant a jammer comes alive. Marlo set the mop down against the wall, slowly, the way you set down anything when you do not want to make a sound. The icy calm she had not felt in 4 years came over her like cold water poured down the back of her neck. Her heart rate did not climb, it dropped. The courthouse, the bucket, the gray uniform shirt. All of it thinned out and fell away, and underneath was the woman who had been built to function precisely in the moment when everyone else stopped functioning. Up on the security feed at the front desk, if anyone had still been able to see it, 4 men in soft body armor were already inside the East Service corridor, moving in a clean tactical stack, with suppressed rifles low and ready. Marlo could not see the feed. She did not need to. She had heard the East doors. She had filed the heavy-hipped man in the utility jacket. She knew, with the flat certainty of arithmetic, that there were professionals in the building and that they had come for something on the upper floors. On the 9th floor, behind a reinforced door and 2 marshals, slept a man named Daniel Ossie. Marlo didn't know his name, but the whole building had felt his weight all week. He was the government's witness in the trial of an arms broker named Victor Halloran, a man who had moved military-grade ordnance to anyone with cash for 2 decades and who was, by every account, leaking out of the upper floors, exactly the kind of defendant whose associates did not let inconvenient witnesses live to testify. Ossie was being held in protective custody in the marshal's wing, set to take the stand at 9 the next morning. A team had been sent to make sure he never did. The first deputy died at the bottom of the south stairwell, quietly, before he ever keyed his dead radio. Marlo heard it the way she heard everything. The soft cough of a suppressor, the slack bag sound of a body folding. She was already moving, low and fast and silent, in a way that would have stopped Bram Stockton's heart if he could have seen it. The frumpy custodian was gone. What moved through the red-lit rotunda was something else entirely, something economical, something that did not waste a single motion. She found Odessa frozen at the top of the basement stairs, trash cart abandoned, her hand pressed flat to her chest. "Marlo," Odessa whispered. "The lights. I heard something downstairs, it sounded like. Listen to me." Marlo's voice had changed completely. It was low and level, and carried an authority that made the older woman go still. "Men with guns are in the building. 4, maybe more. The radios are jammed, so the alarm didn't go out and it can't. I need you to go into the records vault on this floor, the fireproof one, and you pull the door shut behind you, and you do not open it for anyone but me, or a uniformed Minneapolis cop you can see badge and face. Do you understand?" Odessa's mouth opened. "How do you?" "Who are?" "Odessa." Marlo took her gently by the shoulders. "Vault, now. Go." Maybe it was the calm in her. Maybe it was the way she had said it, like a person who had given that exact kind of order 100 times to people who had lived because they obeyed it. Odessa went. The heavy vault door thunked shut behind her, and Marlo was alone in the dark with 4 professional killers and a witness 9 floors up. She did not have a weapon. What she had was a courthouse, and a courthouse, to someone trained the way Marlo Quinn had been trained, was nothing but a room full of tools that hadn't been used correctly yet. She moved to the janitorial closet first and took what she needed without thinking. The way a pianist finds keys. A coil of heavy nylon cord, a roll of duct tape, a 4-pound dead blow mallet, 2 industrial spray bottles of degreaser, and the heavy steel master key ring that opened every utility space in the building. She knew the courthouse the way the men coming up the stairs never could. She knew which corridors necked down to a single doorway. She knew where the floor was always wet from the leaking radiator on 3. She knew that the marble stairs from 6 to 9 had been polished to a glass shine by her own hands that very evening, and that the men in soft boots did not know it yet. She caught the rear man of the stack on the 5th floor landing. He never heard her. She came out of the dark service alcove behind him, looped the nylon cord, and took him down without a sound. Her forearm finding the carotid, her knee planted, counting the seconds in her head the way you count them when you intend a person to wake up rather than not. He went limp. She zip-tied his wrists with his own restraints, taped his mouth, took the suppressed rifle off his sling and the pistol from his hip, and dragged him into the alcove. She checked the rifle by feel. Chambered, safety on, optic dialed for close work. Professional kit. Not local talent. These were contractors, ex-military, paid well, the same breed she had spent 10 years working beside and occasionally against. 3 left, somewhere above her, closing on the 9th floor. She keyed the dead man's earpiece into her own ear, listening, and caught the clipped chatter of men who thought they owned the building. Stacks holding at 8. Generators down, jammers green, we've got 15 minutes before MPD wonders why the cameras went dark. A second voice. Where's done? The first voice again, sharper. Done. Check in. Done. Marlo smiled without any warmth at all and did not answer for the man whose rifle she now carried. She went up the south stairs 3 at a time, soundless, the dead blow mallet hanging from her left hand and the rifle up in her right. On the 8th floor, everything went sideways at once, the way it always does. She came through the stairwell door into the long marble corridor, and there they were. 2 contractors had a marshal on his knees, with his hands behind his head, and the third was working a breaching charge onto the reinforced door of the marshal's protective wing. And standing in the open between them, paralyzed, gray-faced, was Deputy U.S. Marshal Bram Stockton. He had come up to check on his deputies and walked straight into the middle of it. And now he stood there, with his sidearm halfway out of its holster, and his hands shaking too hard to finish the draw, his whole kingdom collapsing around him. Hands, One of the contractors snapped at him. "Drop it or you're done." Stockton's pistol clattered to the marble. He raised his hands. A wet stain spread down the front of his trousers. The man who had spent 6 months telling Marlo Quinn that she didn't understand real responsibility stood there and discovered exactly how much of it he could carry, and the answer broke something in his face. Marlo took the first contractor before any of them registered her in the doorway. One round, center mass, the suppressed rifle barely louder than a hard cough. He dropped. The second man spun toward her and she was already moving, already inside the angle, and she drove the dead-blow mallet up under his jaw with everything her hips had to give. He went down hard and stayed down. The third man, the one on the breaching charge, came off the door fast and clean, lifting his rifle, and for half a heartbeat the corridor held the kind of stillness Marlo knew better than she knew her own name. She did not have the angle. He did, so she made the angle. She threw the spray bottle of degreaser, low and hard, so it burst against his chest, and his eyes flinched. Just a flicker, just the half-second of a man whose face has been hit by something he didn't expect. And in that half-second, she put the front sight on him and pressed the trigger twice. He folded against the breech door and slid down it, and the corridor went quiet. And the only sound was Bram Stockton breathing in ragged gulps with his hands still in the air. "Clear," Marlo said, mostly to herself, sweeping the corridor. The marshal on his knees stared up at her like she had stepped out of the wall of the building. "How many came up?" "Marshal, look at me, how many?" "5, the kneeling deputy managed. "There were 5. You're the custodian." "There's one more then," she said, and that was when the lights in the corridor went red bright as the building's main generator coughed back to life on a backup feed, and the jammer's hum changed pitch, dying. And under the returning hum of the world she heard, far below, the thing she had been half listening for all along. The sound of boots she knew. The cadence of men who moved together because they had bled together. The 5th contractor had not run up, he had run down. And he had run straight into the people who had just breached the east doors behind him. Because Marlo Quinn's old unit had been watching Victor Halloran's network for a year, and when the courthouse went dark at 2:14 in the morning, they had not needed an invitation. They came up the south stairwell in a 4-man stack, suppressed carbines high, kit blacked out, and the first one through the 8th floor door swept the corridor, took in the 3 down contractors and the marshal on his knees and the woman standing over all of it in a gray janitor's shirt with a dead man's rifle, and lowered his weapon and said in a voice gone suddenly thick, "I'll be damned. Saint." His name was Eli Reyes. He had been her team sergeant in 3 countries, and the last time he'd seen her, she'd been bleeding out on a Black Hawk, swearing at a medic to leave her alone and treat the others first. He pulled off his helmet. Behind him came Briggs and Tovar, and a younger operator she didn't know, and the 5th contractor was face down and zip-tied between them, taken alive on the stairs. "We've been on Halloran's crew for 11 months, Reyes said, crossing to her, his eyes moving over the corridor and reading the whole story off the bodies, the way she'd read it off the doors. Picked up chatter they were hitting the witness tonight. We were 3 minutes out when the power dropped." He looked at the contractor she'd taken with the mallet, at the one she'd dropped through a bottle of degreaser, and something moved in his hard face. 3 minutes out, and you'd already cleared the floor with a mop bucket. You haven't lost a step, Quinn. I lost a lot of steps, Eli. Her voice came out rough, now that the cold was draining out of her, now that the aftershake was setting in the way it always did, in the hands first. I just hid the limp. The marshal's wing door opened. Daniel Ossie stood in it, alive, very much alive, blinking at a corridor full of armed men and a janitor holding a rifle, and the kneeling deputy started to laugh and cry at the same time. And far below, the first real Minneapolis police sirens began to thread up through the ice toward a courthouse where, for 15 impossible minutes, the radios had all gone dark. Reyes reached into his plate carrier and took out a small flat box and pressed it into her hands. His jaw was tight. We couldn't do this in a ceremony. You know that. There's no room they'll let us stand in to give it to you with your name. Read out loud. He closed her fingers over it. But the guys voted. We wanted you to have it in your hand. You earned it the day you carried Halsey off that ridge, and you earned it again tonight, and I'm done waiting for a country that's not allowed to know your name to find a way to say thank you." Marlo opened the box. Inside, on dark velvet, lay a decoration she was never permitted to wear in public. The kind of award that comes with a citation stamped in a vault somewhere and a handshake from a man whose office has no sign on the door. The medal caught the red emergency light. Her hands, which had not shaken under fire in 10 years, shook now. "We've got maybe 90 seconds before MPD comes through that stairwell," Briggs said quietly, checking the door. "We can't be on scene." "None of us can." Rye-Eyes nodded. He looked at her one more time, the way you look at someone you have mourned and then found alive. "Take care of yourself, kid." And then they were gone. Back down the south stairs in a single fluid pour of motion, the captured contractor hauled between them, vanishing into the dark service levels as silently and completely as they had come. Leaving Marlo Quinn standing alone in a corridor full of evidence she would tell the police nothing useful about. She slipped the flat box into the deep front pocket of her gray uniform shirt, where it sat against her hip like a small, warm secret, and she let out one long breath. Bram Stockton was still standing against the wall. His hands had come down at last. His pistol still lay on the marble where he had dropped it. He had not fired a shot. He had watched the woman he'd called blind and lazy and unworthy of real responsibility walk through 5 professional killers like they were furniture. And now he stood in his ruined trousers with his whole idea of himself lying in pieces at his feet, staring at her like he had never once actually seen her. "Quinn," he said. His voice came out cracked and small. "Quinn, I don't." Marlo didn't look at him. She bent and picked up the mallet and the coil of nylon cord and the empty spray bottle that had probably saved her life. She gathered her tools the way she had gathered them 10,000 times. Methodically, without drama. The police were coming up the stairs now. She could hear them, real cops, badges, and faces she'd let through. "Marshal Stockton," she said, and her voice had slid back into its soft, flat, apologetic register, the voice of the night custodian, the invisible gray woman of the Hollis Reardon Federal Courthouse. "There's a slip hazard by the metal detectors on 2. Melted ice. I'll get to it before the morning protectees come through." She paused at the head of the stairs, the dead-blow mallet hanging easy from one hand. "You should sit down, sir. You've had a long night." And she went down to mop the floor, leaving the marshal staring at her back, understanding at last, too late and completely, that he had spent 6 months sneering at a woman who could have ended him with her bare hands a dozen quiet ways and chosen, every single night, not to. The staff would talk about that storm for years. They would never get the story straight. There were sealed reports and a witness who testified at 9 sharp the next morning, and a defendant who would die in federal prison, and there were 4 contractors who would never explain how a building full of clerks had defeated a professional kill team. But one thing on the night shift of the Reardon Courthouse was certain after that. Certain as the ice on the windows and the lemon smell of the floors, and it never changed again. Nobody ever raised their voice to the quiet custodian again.